Hello, welcome to another episode of Malvo Talks. My name is Ethan Malvo. The topic for today will be about the art of film. The reason why I chose this topic is because I made a very interesting discovery when I was at the bookstore. This book by Ernest Lindgren called The Art of Film, which was all of $2, but yet articulates so much of what is wrong with the way films are made today. Also is inspired by a conversation that I had with a neighbor of mine about why films are so crummy, those films that are remade from our childhood, those of us who grew up in the 80s. There is really a sentiment of selling crapola and ruining what perfectly was a good franchise, even though for them on their side, they think they're doing a very good thing in terms of making, remaking, or certainly re-ingratiating the affection that a film had, or following a formula that a film had that at one particular time meant great success would follow. Well, we're going to explore the art of film, and that's where I take the title from this book, The Art of Film, for this episode of Malvo Talks, and we could just get right into it. One of the things that is wrong, of course, now with the way that Hollywood, and certainly the movie industry, is structured is that the takeover of the industry by corporations meant that the art of filmmaking would be forever tethered to the art of, well, it shouldn't even be art, but just the business of selling a product. And film is not, even though it can be characterized as a product, film is not something that, just like soap or toothpaste, one could just throw out there and expect people to be necessarily invigorated or certainly encouraged to want to have or bring home or embrace as being a object, a consumer item that one would want to have. Film is a process that you do need talented people to be a part of. And you have to understand the fundamentals of filmmaking, which is characterized in this book. Also, just as an aside, because I'm going to extend this through three 15-minute episodes, one thing that people have got to understand about the art of film is also the history of Hollywood. And that was characterized particularly old Hollywood, and that was characterized not in a nonfiction book, but by a writer who was part of that studio system in the late 30s, early 40s, called Bud Schulberg. And his groundbreaking book, which I have right here, called What Makes Sammy Run, which we're going to take because there are a lot of things that you can get out of a fiction book, a novel, that will articulate the various problems, certainly the landscape of filmmaking in Hollywood and entertainment, that you will not get from reading reams and reams of productivity reports and evaluations of various franchises or feedback of audience attendance at theaters and all of the rest of that stuff. There are a lot of things that you can get out of a novel that you just will not be able to get in terms of a dense statistical report, and which makes things very concise and simple. Anyway, let's just get down to basics. I'm going to start with the art of film itself. And one of the things that Ernest Lindgren pointed out in his book, which we as lay people who are not at all interested in terms of film, or may not be aware of when a movie is made, is that film is not, you can't treat film like you treat a novel. Film is all about action. And one of the marvelous things, certainly one of the most important things that any filmmaker has got to have and understand in the process of making a movie, is that you have to have something which he calls the action theme, but I'm going to call it, because people would get confused about that. Let me just put this book down for a second. Something that is called the unitary action. The unitary action is that action. See, it's not the plot. The unitary action is that action that holds a film together. So that, let's take for example, The Godfather, which I know many of you and has been seen by billions of people now across the world, but let's just take that film for example. The unitary action is not Michael Corleone's decision to jettison a straight-laced life and become a mafia don in order to take revenge on the people that killed his father. That is not the unitary action. The unitary action is this: when Vito Corleone decides that he is not going to allow Sollozzo, or the Turk, as he was called in the film, to have access to the influence that he can garner from politicians and other bureaucrats so that he can establish a thriving drug trade. And that is the unitary action, because that is the action to which all of the other actions within the film hinge on. See, had Don Corleone said, yes, I'll go along with the drug business, Michael Corleone would have remained a straight-laced person, because there would have been no need for him to get involved in his father's nefarious activities. See, the unitary action, and this is the other thing, and that the unitary action does not necessarily have to involve the main characters directly. It could be something that happens out of view of a film, or out of view of what a main character is doing. But it nevertheless warps, or certainly influences, the series and the strings of action that come when it takes place and when it happens. The difference in terms of the novel, where you can have in the novel many actions. Let me just go back and just say that you see the difference between the film and the novel. You see, you can't do on the film what you do with the novel, is that, see, film has got to be simplistic. The novel can be convoluted. The novel can even be filled with a lot of tangential episodes, and certainly can have a lot of strands and within a plot, plots within plots within plots. But you can't do that with a movie. A movie has got to be simplistic. I'm going to read here from this book, just so you can get a flavor of what this author is saying about film. Let me just make sure I can get it, because he articulates better than I can the way in which you something that you just have to have in terms of the unitary action. And he says this: that the unity of a fiction film derives not from the presentation of a subject or an idea or an argument, but from its action. It is dependent on the representation of a single action, the elaboration of a single plot theme. It is important to understand precisely the sense in which the word plot theme is used here, not to confuse it with a subject or idea or a moral purpose. Let me see here. There's something else that I want to say. He says, to search for an illustration of this, he says, I open a newspaper and my eyes fall upon the words, man jumps into canal. Here, with a vengeance, is action. The very essence of action crystallized into a headline. As it stands, however, it is incomplete. The editor meant it to be incomplete so that, having shocked me into attention, it would then tease me to read the paragraph below it. Let me see if I can find some more characterizations, but I think people could get the idea. I'm going to read some more in the next episode, but you know, in thinking about the movie Prometheus, and it wasn't until I read this book that I could articulate what was really wrong with that movie by Ridley Scott. The thing that was wrong with Prometheus was this, that he teased his audience into believing that Prometheus was going to finally answer the question about what the alien was created for, what it was used for as a weapon. Was it even used as a weapon? Was it just an accident or whatever it was? And he did not do that. Instead, he convoluted the whole creation of the alien, compounded it with, well, before we even knew about the engineers. In the old days, they were just called the space jockey. How the mothership was going to get on to LV 426, you didn't answer that question for the audience. And again, what the alien was used for. He didn't answer that question. Who created the alien? He answered that, but only in passing. And then he added this other component of the engineers, who were formerly the space jockeys, being the creators of human beings. Well, you see, that did not satisfy the audience. And you see, this is how the movie should have been opened. See, first you would have the engineers standing there on LV, 223, standing there with their masks in the laboratory, waiting for the victim, either another engineer or something else, to have the alien spring forth. Then you see them encapsulate the alien in some kind of stasis capsule or anything, hand it to somebody. That engineer climbs aboard the ship. They still have their mask on. That engineer climbs aboard the ship, goes somewhere. Then the story picks up with David and all the scientists who discover the cave drawing. Of course, David doesn't come in until they're actually on the ship going to 223. See, so that now you've already satisfied something. And the unitary action is the creation of the alien. Has nothing to do with the main characters now. The main characters know nothing about that. But, you see, they have happened upon later in the film, and they will happen upon that very laboratory where the engineers have created the alien, and the alien is taken off somewhere. Now, you don't know exactly what it's used for. It may be used as a weapon, it may be used as some kind of lethal experiment. You don't know what it's going to be used for. But nevertheless, you know a couple of things. You know that it's been created, you know that it is used for some kind of sinister purpose, perhaps a weapon, as I said, experimentation. But you know, and you are satisfied with that unitary action. And then at the end of the film, you see, you will finally learn that the same engineers that created the alien created human beings. But nevertheless, you have satisfied something that was teased to the audience. And what was teased to the audience was, when I saw it in the previews for the movie that I went to, was, oh, well, now you were finally going to see the engineers or how the engineers came across the alien. And that was not really answered. And even with the whole thing of the alien, or at least what is called in the alien lore, the deacon, bursting out of the engineer's chest cavity, all of that really did not satisfy because the unitary action was wrong. And I'm going to stop it there because I've elapsed 15 minutes, and then we'll come back in part 2 where I'll pick up on this theme because I think this is very important for people to understand. If your unitary action cannot be expressed in one sentence, maybe two, your whole film is kaput. And I will be back in part 2 and we'll pick up on this subject where we will learn more about the art of film as well as the history of Hollywood and the book What Made Sammy Run.